Right, let's see who is in the house today. Raise your hand if you have children. Great. Raise your hand if you have parents. That's even better. Raise your hand if you are still a child. Yay, we've got loads of them. Now raise your hand if you haven't raised your hand before. Good, we've got everybody. Today I'm going to talk about conscious relationships through parenting, specifically. Now, I'm aware some of you may be thinking, what does conscious relationship mean? Well, that's something I learned from my daughter when she was 6 years old. About 7 years ago, my life was very fast. It was divided into 20-minute slots, and I was running from one meeting to another one. And one day I went to pick her up from school, and in the car she asked me to go swimming with her. With my schedule it was impossible, so I said no. She didn't give up, so she kept asking me the same question on and on again. I kept giving her the same answer on and on again. It got to a point I totally lost my patience, shouted at her. There was some silence, and then I could hear her crying at the back of the car. I felt guilty, but then I thought she had really pushed it. Later on that evening, everything was back to normal, and our bedtime routines were the most precious times for us, so I never missed them. And after I read my storybook to her, she sort of sat back in the bed and said, "Mommy, can I have a word with you?" I said, "Okay." And she looked straight in the eye, me, and she said, "Mommy, shouting at your own child is a poor choice." Her words dropped like a bomb. Part of me still wanted to say, "Well, you're too smart for your age, go to sleep now." But in my heart, I knew she was making a lot of sense. So I said, "Wow, Amelia, what you're saying is really important. I'm really going to think about it tonight." And I still wanted to justify my shouting. I said, "Do you remember what happened in the car?" And she said, "I know, we both have to apologize to each other." So we did. And I kissed her goodnight. And I went to my room, looked at myself in the mirror, and asked the question, who am I choosing to be as a mother? Clearly, I didn't enjoy or I didn't like who I had become. So that was the night that I became conscious how I was being in my relationship with my daughter. And since then, I have been in a journey of inner change. Now, there are a lot of people out there making a difference and contributing. I have deep respect for them. But also, I keep hearing these messages talking about changing the world, and changing the world has become a buzzword. I'm afraid it become quite superficial. Well, the world is changing anyway, with us or without us. What we need to focus on is changing ourselves in order to create the world that we want. It's a paradigm shift, a bit like this. One of my favorite tweets. Speaking about change, meet my friend Mary Allen. She's 87 years old. And I met her in a research center in Virginia in October. And we were both participating in a workshop about human consciousness. She has inspired me in many ways. But what really blew me away was the statement that she made at the end of that workshop. she said, "I'm growing, and I still need to change more." Because she hasn't given up in change, Mary Ellen is not just living, she's actually alive. It is this willingness to change can transform our relationships. And I witnessed that this summer when I was on a holiday in Turkey, which is my home country. A group of us were going on a boat trip, and one of my friends decided to take her son, but leave her younger daughter at home. She said that she didn't want her daughter to feel bad or left out, so together with her son, she told her a lie about where they were going. And I think she felt guilty because she kept talking about it on the boat. Through our conversations, she came to realize that even though she had good intentions, she was creating unintended impact. Firstly, she was teaching her son how to lie. Secondly, she was teaching him lying was okay. And thirdly, she was actually breaking the trust in her relationship with her daughter. Because of her willingness to change and the new information she had, now she has a very different relationship with her children. And trust is one of the most important ingredients in any relationship. Have you seen a child jumping off a wall or a table knowing that his parent is going to catch him? And sometimes they jump even when you're not ready. Have you seen the sheer joy on that child's face? That's what trust creates. But somewhere along the way, we lose that trust over a white lie or a broken promise. That's why we have to pay attention to our relationships. Because we hold a role as a parent, we assume that we have a relationship with our child. But that may not be true. Just because we are related to them doesn't mean we have a relationship with them. And this goes beyond parenting. In my career, I coached thousands of hours. And there has been a common thread with every person. They all wanted to be coached in their relationships. What I came to discover that quality of our life is determined by the quality of our relationships. You may be an accomplished person in many ways, but if your relationships are poor, so is the quality of your life. Let me tell you a story about a father. This father had a dream for his son, and he wanted him to become a doctor. So he sent him to a medical school. And unfortunately, his son failed in all his studies. Then the father thought, well, the second best thing for him was to become a priest. Unfortunately, his son has failed at that too. Then the father said, "You will be a disgrace to yourself and to your entire family." Eventually, this young man found his own way and found his own path and started to work with plants and animals, which were his passion. And when he was invited to go on a research trip for about 2 years around the world, his father said, "That will be a waste of time." Well, it turned that it wasn't a waste of time, because the name of this young man was Charles Darwin. Darwin managed to pursue his own passion despite the pressure that he received from his father. But there are millions of people out there who do not. And also, Darwin found success in what he did, but his relationship with his father never recovered. I also have dreams for my daughter. It's impossible not to have them, but I know I have to let them go in order for her to achieve her own. What's worrying me about parenting today is that we're using tools and techniques which are very manipulative and primitive. We don't even know we're using them. It may surprise you, but some of those common methods include timeouts, labeling, rewards, punishments, worst, conditional parenting, which means withholding our love until we get what we want. These methods may work in the short term, but we're actually harming our children in the long term, because these methods are creating emotional insecurity, confusion, distance between parents and children, and also they are teaching our children how to be manipulative themselves. I'm afraid psychologists and therapists are going to be very busy in the next few decades trying to undo the stuff which is happening to our children today. There's a paradigm shift that needs to happen in the way that we look at our children. Instead of seeing them something to deal with, we see the enormous potential and the wisdom which exists in all of them. We see that we can learn from them as much as we can teach them. Children are like rivers. They have their own path, their own natural flow and the direction. If you work against it, of course parenting is going to be difficult. But if you work with it, it's an amazing journey to take on. Thank you. Here are a few words from Khalil Gibran about children. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. Now we're getting into the good stuff. This is the brighter world. Please follow me. Every child seeks to be seen, heard, and empowered. Every child deserves to feel safe, unconditional loved, and celebrated. Every child seeks to be seen and heard. What does that mean? It is the teenager who shouts, "I hate you," but what he really means, "You're not listening to me." It's the 5-year-old who wants to be spoon-fed, but what he really means is, "I need your love." It means we are listening to our children in a deeper level, beyond the words and the behavior. Every child seeks to be empowered. Instead of telling them what to do all the time, we let them take risks and make mistakes, and we stand by them strongly to help them evaluate their choices. Every child deserves to feel safe. This is emotional, internal safety. We allow them to be who they want to be. We help them to develop a capacity where they can decide what's right or wrong through their internal compass. It's a strong sense of self that they know who they are and they trust themselves. Every child deserves to be loved unconditionally because they're just perfect the way they are. The metaphor that comes to mind is a flower. If I am looking at a flower, I don't say, "Oh, I wish there were more petals in this." Or I don't say, oh, the color was brighter. Or I don't say, the stem was larger. I just love it for the way it is. And this is unconditional love. Every child deserves to be celebrated. I'll share an experience that I had with you. I went to watch a musical called Billy Elliot. Most of you must have heard of it. It's about a boy who becomes a ballet dancer. It's halfway through the show, the boy who plays Billy, he is about 10 years old. He had a solo section where he danced and he sang and he was beautiful. And I think he moved the audience. When he finished his solo section, the audience went absolutely wild. They were cheering, clapping, crying, laughing, and he was standing on the stage like this with his hands open and receiving all this amazing energy and accepting it. And in between, he kept giggling with joy doing this. And I stood there watching what was happening. It was like a spiritual experience. I thought, oh my God, every child deserves to be celebrated like this, with belief and admiration. Of course, the theater is just a metaphor. This is all about that. It's only 2 sentences. We can all do it. This is my daughter, Amelia, when she was 6 years old. That night when she told me, "Mommy, shouting at your own child is a poor choice," I looked into her eyes, and I saw this amazing human being in that little body. She was larger than the universe with her wisdom and humility. And in that moment, I sensed her essence. I had never perceived her like that before. She was totally complete and whole. There was nothing I could add on to it. And that essence told me to follow her and discover her, because there was a lot more to see in her if I looked deeply with consciousness. Today, my hope for you, you look at your relationships with consciousness and you see the essence of the person, not what they're acting. By looking at and seeing others like this, you will find yourself, and by being yourself, you will change the world.